Hey friends, what's going on? Welcome back to Babel on Talmud. Today we're starting Daf Kuf Chaf Beis of Masechta Shabbos, Daf 122. Friends, let me tell you something. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful Daf today. Great Daf. Got like a few juicy sugyas in over here. It's not too long. Great Daf. Very, very good Daf, friends. Let's do a quick overview before we begin. At the beginning, we're just going to do a few, start off with a few random stuff from Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana Amr Chanina, just because we had mentioned him yesterday with that, scorpion thing that fell in the base medrash. But then we move on to a new Mishnah and then a new Perek, okay? So we move on to a new Mishnah, which discusses a non-yid who does work for a yid on Shabbos. He does a melacha for a yid on Shabbos. What are those halachos? Very interesting. Then we conclude the 16th parak of Masechta Shabbos and move on to the 17th parak of Masechta Shabbos, the parak of Kol Akelim. We are going to talk about Yesh Binyan Bekelim, Yesh Stira Bekelim, or Ein Binyan Bekelim, Be'ein Stira Bekelim. A little interesting machlokas between Abaye and Rava Darton. And then at the very end, we have machlokas between Rav Yehuda and Rabba regarding Klisha Melachto Le'isser in terms of Muksa. So it's a very, very interesting day ahead of us, friends. Let's jump in. We're going to start on Daf Kuf Chaf Aleph Amud Beis, 2 lines from the bottom. Ve'amr Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana Amr Reb Chanina Pmutos Shel Beis Rebbe Murta L'Taltalim B'Shabbos. Great. So says Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana, the name of Reb Chanina, that these candelabras from the house of Rebbe, it is permitted to move them on Shabbos. They're not muktzah. Amar le Reb Zera. So Reb Zera says to Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana, B'nitalim biyado achas o b'shtei yadayim. Reb Zera wants to know, is this candelabra something that specifically is movable in one hand? What if you need two hands to move it? And as Rashi points out, let's read the first Rashi in Kuf Chaf Beis Amud Aleph, even though it's really based on the answer. But it says right. The point is that if you carry it in two hands, it's a big candelabra. If it's a big candelabra, well then it's the kind of thing that you put in a specific place and you leave it there. And for that reason, so the question is, are we talking about big candelabras or small candelabras? And then the answer is, so Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana answers him, right? So Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana answers Reb Zera. He says, when we say that you can move the candelabras of Beis Rabbi, it means the ones that are like your father's, meaning that they're smaller. And because they're smaller, and I imagine what it means is that to answer your question, we're talking about ones that you move with one hand. The smaller menorahs, those are movable on Shabbos, but the larger ones that you would really set in one place and not move them in general, so you wouldn't move them on Shabbos. V'amar Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana Amar Reb Chanina, Kronos Shel Beis Rebbe, these wagons of Rebbe's house. As Rashi says, Kronos Asuyos Lifnei Adam, they are made for people. These, I guess a wagon that a person goes in them. So Mutar L'Taltalim B'Shabbos, you would be able to move it on Shabbos. And I assume that when we talk about moving a wagon, it probably has wheels attached to it, and is it muktzah? Do you have to leave it put? Or can you move it on Shabbos? Amr le Reb Zera. Rabbi Abba says the name of Rav Chanina. I'm sorry, Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana says the name of Rav Chan. Holy shnikes. Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana, he says in the name of Rabbi Chanina that you would be able to move these wagons of the house of Rebbe. Fine. Amr le Reb Zera b'nitalim ba'adam echad o b'shnei b'nei adam. Reb Zera asks, are we talking about wagons that are movable, just by one person, or what about wagons that you need two people in order to move? So Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana gives the same response, which is we're talking about the ones like your father has, i.e. smaller ones, but it sounds like if they were larger ones, then you would not move them on Shabbos. Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana, and says Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana, Hitur loim Rabbi Chanina leveis Rebbe lishtos yain b'kronos shel nachrim b'chosam echad. So it says Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana that Rabbi Chanina permitted the house of Rebbe to drink wine that was transported in wagons belonging to Gentiles, even though there was only one seal on the wine. So this has to deal with stam yenam, or yenesech. Maybe yenesech. Yeah, probably yenesech, I guess. right? The concern, right? Of course, there are all sorts of laws and all sorts of concerns when it comes to wine handled by non-Jewish people, right? They are based on the Gemaras in Avodah Zarah, based on, right, there was a concern that this wine may have been used for servicing Avodah Zarah, and therefore, in order for a Jew to be able to drink wine that was handled by a non-Jew, so we would have to be assured that it wasn't tampered in any way, and potentially used for Avodah Zarah. And therefore, I guess we need proper seals. And so what Rabbi Abba Bar Kana is saying in the name of Rabbi Chanina, what Rabbi Abba Bar Kana is saying is that Rabbi Chanina allowed the house of Rebbe to drink wine that was transported in non-Jewish wagons, even if the barrel that the wine was in only, or the bottle, whatever it is, only has one seal on it and not two. Now, says Rabbi Chanina, says Rabbi Abba Bar Kana, I don't know if Rabbi Chanina allowed Rebbe to drink these from these wine barrels that only had one seal on them. I don't know if it's because he holds like Rabbi Eliezer, who that's his opinion, that all you need is one seal. Or maybe he holds that in general you would need more than one seal. However, out of fear of Rebbe, the non-Jews wouldn't tamper with it. As Rashi says, in the last wide line of Rashi, very interesting, right? That the assumption is that this non-Jewish person who was transporting this wine would be too scared to tamper with this barrel of wine in any way, since he knows that it's going to be delivered to the house of Rebbe, and the Nisius, Rebbe, who was the Nasi, who was the leader, it was a political appointment by the king, and therefore, the person transporting the wine, definitely, you mess with the Beit Nasiya, you mess with the king, and nobody wants to mess with the king, and therefore he would leave it alone, and that's why one seal would be enough. So Rabbi Abba Bar Kana is saying he doesn't know if the reason why Rabbi Chanina allowed Rebbe to drink wine that was transported by non-Jewish people, he's not sure if it was because Rabbi Chanina holds like Rabbi Eliezer that all you need is one seal and that's enough, or in general he would hold that you need more than one seal, not like Rabbi Eliezer. However, because this wine was being transported to Rebbe, who was the Nasi, we can rely on the fact that the non-Jewish person transporting the wine would be scared to tamper with the wine in any way, since he knows that he's giving it to the Nasi, who was appointed by the king, and he just doesn't want to take any risks. Maybe that is why it was permitted for Rebbe to drink this wine, that's really why Rabbi Chanina permitted the house of Rebbe to drink this wine. He says he's not sure why. Okay, friends, now we move on to a very interesting Mishnah, which discusses a non-Jew who does melacha for a Jew on Shabbos. Now, in my opinion, it's a very interesting sugya, but it could also be a little bit confusing. So I think what might be a good idea is if I give an introduction before we learn this. I think that might be a good idea, and because I think it might be a good idea, I'm going to do it. Hopefully, it'll work out. So here's the thing, friends. Rule number 1: a non-Jew cannot intentionally do a melacha for a Jew on Shabbos. If that happens, that's a problem. So, for example, if there's a Jew sitting in a room reading and it's dark in the room, a non-Jew walks into the room, sees, oh, this guy's reading, it's dark, non-Jew turns on the light, leaves the room. That is not okay. The Jew, I guess, would have to leave the room because the non-Jew is clearly doing the melacha for the Jew. If that's the case, not allowed. Okay. Where it becomes more interesting is what if the non-Jew is doing work for himself, but once he's already doing work for himself, so then the Jew can benefit from it as well. Okay? So what would happen if the non-Jew walks into the room, turns on the light, opens a book, and starts reading as well? So, in that case, the non-Jew is really turning it on for himself. The Jew happens to be there. Can he, benefit from that as well? So here's where things get more interesting. So there's a difference between if the Jewish person and the non-Jewish person know each other, if they know each other. So let's first start with where they do not know each other, because that's a little bit easier. So if they do not know each other, well, then sure, no problem. As long as the non-Jew is doing it for himself, right? The Jew doesn't know who this non-Jewish person is. The non-Jewish person walks in, turns on the light, starts reading. Okay, great. The Jew can also continue to read. It's no big deal. When they do know each other, so now, there's more of a concern that maybe this non-Jewish person, he knows this Jewish person, maybe he wants to help him out, so maybe there's concern that really the non-Jewish person is doing it for the Jew. So there's a machlokas here between Abaye and Rava. Abaye says that if a non-Jew does melacha for himself and they know each other, a Jew would only be able to benefit if the Jew was not in the presence of the non-Jew at the time that the non-Jew did the melacha. That's what's important, right? Was the Jew in front of the non-Jew at the time that the non-Jew did the melacha for himself, right? And then the Jew wants to kind of benefit from it. Rava's opinion is that no, it doesn't matter if the Jew is in front of him or not. What's important is the type of melacha. If it's something like turning on a light, right? And the non-Jew is turning on the light for himself, and the non-Jew doesn't have to do any additional effort whatsoever in order for the Jew to additionally benefit from it, so that would be okay. But as we're going to see, something like, let's say the non-Jew were to be schlepping water for his own animal, would the Jew then be able to use the extra for his animal? Well, then there's a concern that maybe the non-Jew took a little bit extra water so that he can give it to the Jew, in which case he was doing melacha for the Jew. Okay. Okay. That is like the basic overview, and then we'll jump into the Gemara. It's okay if you didn't necessarily pick up on all the details right now. We're going to read it in the Gemara, but I did just want to kind of do a basic introduction before we begin, so at least you're familiar with the different divisions, and as they come up, they will be familiar. Okay, friends, let's jump in. New Mishnah. Nachri shehidlik es haner. So if you have a non-Jew who lit a candle, okay, turned on the light. So mishtamish la'or Yisrael. So right, just like in our example, the non-Jew walks into the room, turns on the light, opens a book, and starts reading. Well, a Jew can also read from that light, no big deal. V'im b'shvil Yisrael aser. But if the non-Jew turned on the light for the Jew and then walked out, that would be a problem. Mile mayim la'ashkos behemto. If a non-Jew filled up a bucket of water so that he can give that water to his own animal, right? Meaning he fills up water in Rishus HaRabim, then schleps it into some chatzer. So obviously a Jew would not be allowed to do that on Shabbos. It would be hotzah, things like that. So the non-Jew fills up some water, brings it into the chatzer, gives some water to his animal, and there's leftover water. Can the Jew say, oh, great, there's leftover water, let me give that to my animal? So, mashke achar Yisrael. So, yeah, no problem. The Yid can use the extra water to give his own animal to drink. V'im b'shvil Yisrael aser. But once again, if the non-Jew specifically just filled up water and gave it directly to the Jew, and i.e. he did it specifically for the Jew, that would be a problem. Fine. Asanachri kevesh leiredbo. If they are on a boat, and if they're on a boat, okay, now, and it's Shabbos, and now they have to get off the boat, okay? So, Yored Acharav Yisrael. So, if a non-Jew made a ramp so that they can walk off of the boat, so he basically built a ramp on Shabbos so that they can walk off the boat, no problem. The Jew can walk off the boat after the non-Jew does. Because again, the assumption is the non-Jew built it for himself. Once he built it for himself, so the Yid can walk on, use it as well. V'im b'shvil Yisrael aser. But if the non-Jew specifically built the ramp for the Yid, I don't know, maybe the non-Jew is planning to stay on the boat, whatever it is, well then it would be aser. Ma'aser Rabban Gamliel, Uzkenim, there was a story with Rabban Gamliel and the elders, Shayibayin b'sfina, that they were coming on a boat, V'asanachri kevesh leired bo, v'yardu bo, Rabban Gamliel Uzkenim. And a non-Jew made a ramp to get off the boat with, and Rabban Gamliel and the other elders used that ramp to get off the boat, and we're going to go into a little bit more detail about all of these things. Fine. So I think that one thing that is certainly clear from the Mishnah is that if a non-Jew does melacha specifically for a Jew and not for himself at all, that would be a problem. Okay? We saw different cases. We saw, lighting a flame. We saw filling up water for animals. We saw building a ramp for a boat. And we said in these cases, the Jew can, use the benefit from the work of the non-Jew as long as the non-Jew was not doing it only for the Jew. Okay. Utzricha, and the Gemara says we need all three cases. Fine. Tiashmo'inan ner, because if we would only have the case of the candle, of a non-Jew lighting a candle for himself, and, the Jew benefits from it as well. Well, mishum dener le'echa ner le'meya. That's because there's we assume, well, he doesn't have to do any additional work whatsoever for the Jew to benefit from this candle. You literally light the candle. One person can benefit from it just as much as 100 people can benefit from it. There's no difference. Aval mayim, but I might think that what about when the non-Jew schleps water for his animal? So ligzar, I might think that a Jew would not be allowed to use the extra because dilma asila afushe b'shvil Yisrael, because maybe the non-Jew might say, there's a Jew over there, let me bring some more water. And that way, whatever I don't use, the Jew will be able to use. So I might think that would be a problem, because in that case, it's not like a candle where it's the same effort for, light for one person as it is for 100. Over here, the more people you want to provide water for, the more water you have to get. So I might think that in this case, the non-Jew is specifically going out of his way to add extra water so that the Jew can have some water. So that is why the Mishnah has to tell us that even in that case it would be permitted, since the non-Jew is doing it for himself. The Jew can benefit from the whatever's left over. V'kevesh, what's the chiddush of kevesh? Lamali. How come I need the example of the ramp coming off of the boat? So Maisa Rabbi Gamliel's came kamash malan. So the point is, well, because of the story of Rabbi Gamliel and the Zakanim being on the boat, and the non-Jew builds the ramp. The Mishnah wanted to teach us about that case, and that's why it is included as well. Fine. Let's move on. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught in a brisa, Nachri shliket asavim. Okay, so if you have a non-Jew, and he collected a whole bunch of grass on Shabbos, okay? Ma'achil acharav Yisrael. Well, so a non-Jew, he collected a whole bunch of grass for his animal on Shabbos, and the non-Jew fed it to his own animals. Whatever's left over, he can give that the Jew can have for his animals, no problem. Vim b'shvil Yisrael aser, but of course, if the non-Jew specifically gathers grass for a Jew, then it'll be a problem. Mile mayim lashkos be'emto mashka acharav Yisrael. If the non-Jew filled up water for his own animal, so whatever's left over, the Jew can use. V'im b'shvil Yisrael aser. But if the non-Jew specifically filled up water for the Jew, then it is asur. Fine. Friends, listen up. Bamedvar mamurim she'ein makiro. When we say this, when we say that as long as the non-Jew, let's say, fills up water or collects grass for himself, the Jew can use whatever's left over, that's only when they do not know each other. Aval makiro asur. But if they know each other, it's forbidden. Now, I think really what would be more accurate is probably to say that it's certainly just not pashut asur. It then becomes more complicated. It's going to be machlokas and Abai and Rava about, in what cases would it be permitted, in what cases not. We're going to have to get there. But definitely when we say simply that if a non-Jew schleps water, whatever's left over, a Jew can use, no questions asked, that is only going to be when they don't know each other. When they know each other, then it becomes more complicated, right? Depending on how it's done, it may be mutter, it may be asur. Fine. So now the Gemara asks a kasha. Ini, is this so? Is what so? This question is going back to the beginning of this brisa. So the first thing that this brisa said is that a non-Jew who collects grass for his own animal, so a Jew can use the leftover grass. So we're gonna take another look at that statement. Is that really so? V'amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav Chanina. Rav Huna said in the name of Rav Chanina, Ma'imid Adam behemto agabe asavim b'Shabbos. Okay, a person can put his animal, on grass on Shabbos. There's no problem with that. The grass is connected to the ground, no problem. The animal can eat it, no problem. Avalo al gabe muktzah b'Shabbos. But you cannot, have your animal right next to muktzah on Shabbos. So, for example, if you had these grass, so now this grass that this non-Jew picked is muktzah. Because before Shabbos, it was still connected to the ground. Now that he picked it on Shabbos, it wasn't there before Shabbos. It wasn't, gathered and picked before Shabbos. Therefore, it's muktzah. So on the one hand, we have this brisa that's saying that whatever's left over, the non-Jew would be, the Jew would be able to use. But at the same time, Rav Huna said the name of Rab Chanina that a Jew would not be able to bring his animal to muktzah on Shabbos because we're concerned that maybe the Jew will pick up this grass, pick up this muktzah, and feed it to his animal. So, what's pshat? On the one hand, the brisa is saying that the Jew can use the leftover muktzah grass. On the other hand, we have the statement of Rav Huna in the name of Rab Chanina that a Jew cannot bring his animal to muktzah on Shabbos, and this grass is muktzah. So, dikayim la ba'apa va'azli va'achla. So, the Gemara answers that in this brisa, when it says that the yid is able to use this leftover grass, it's not talking about where he's mamish taking his animal right to the grass, because in that case, like Rav Huna in the name of Rab Chanina, that would not be allowed because we're concerned about muktzah. It's where basically the Jew guided his animal to where the extra grass from the non-Jew is. Right? I mean, he wasn't going to where the grass is, because if he did, then that would be a problem of muktzah, right? The concern that he would move this grass. What he did was he basically blocked his animal's way so that there was only one direction he can go in, and that was towards this leftover grass. In that case, it would be permitted because he's staying far away from the grass, and there's no concern that he's going to move it. Okay, fine. That was a little bit of a technicality, but here we're going to get back to our sugya of in what cases would a Jew be able to benefit from the work that a non-Jew did for himself on Shabbos? Right? So Amar Mar, we said earlier, B'medvar mamurim she'ein makiro of a makiro aser. Okay. We had quoted this brisa a few minutes ago, that if a non-Jew gathers grass for his own animal, or he schleps some water from the well for his own animal, so a Jew would be able to benefit from the leftovers, right? Now, we said, however, there is a caveat. And that caveat is that the Jew can only benefit from the leftovers of the non-Jew's work that he did for himself, if he doesn't know the non-Jew. If he knows the non-Jew, so then he wouldn't be able to benefit from the leftovers of the non-Jew, because the concern is that maybe the non-Jew brought extra water or brought extra grass for the Jew, which means that he basically did work on Shabbos for the Jew. So that wouldn't be allowed. But we have a question. Har Rabban Gamliel makiro hava. But the story with Rabban Gamliel on the boat, it says that they were on a boat and they had to get off the boat. So the non-Jew built a ramp for himself. And then Rabban Gamliel and his friends used it afterwards. But obviously Rabban Gamliel and his friends knew this Gentile on the boat. I mean, after all, they were on the same boat together. They knew each other. And yet, we're saying that Rabban Gamliel and the other rabbis benefited from the work that this Gentile did for himself. So the Gentile built his ramp for himself, and then once he built it for himself, so then Rabban Gamliel and the other rabbis, used it afterwards to get off the boat. But one second, we just had a brisa that says that you would only be able to benefit from the work that a non-Jew did for himself when you don't know who he is. But in the case of Rabban Gamliel, they knew each other, they were on the same boat together, and yet Rabban Gamliel and the other rabbis are benefiting from the work that the non-Jew did for himself. So Amar Abaye, Abaye answers, Shelo b'fanav hava. Okay, so Abaye answers that the reason why Rabban Gamliel was allowed to benefit why Rabbi Gamliel and the other rabbis benefited from this work that the non-Jew did for himself is because when the non-Jew built the ramp, well, Rabbi Gamliel and the other rabbis were not in front of him. They were not there when he built it. And because when they were not there when he built it, so he wasn't building it with them in mind. And because he wasn't building it with them in mind, so therefore, they were able to use it. Okay? Very good. Rava Amar. Whereas Rava said, Afilu tema bifanav. Rava says, no, it doesn't matter where Rabbi Gamliel and the rabbis were at the time that the non-Jew built the ramp. Rather, ner le'echad ner le'mea. However, the ramp is basically the same thing as a flame. You don't have to do anything extra for one person versus 10 people. Right? It's the same ramp. You build a ramp to get off the boat. So this non-Jew who's building the ramp so he can get off the boat, well then, he's not doing anything extra to enable Rabbi Gamliel and the other rabbis to get off the boat as well. And for that reason, even though they knew each other, Rabbi Gamliel and the rabbis were able to use that ramp because he wasn't doing any extra work for them. Okay, there you go. There you go. There you go. So what have we seen so far, friends? So what have we seen so far? I think basically so far we've seen everything that we need to know about a non-Jew doing work for a Jew on Shabbos. Number one, if the non-Jew does work directly for the Jew, not for himself at all, that's not going to be allowed. If he does work for himself, and then, while he's doing it for himself, the Jew can benefit as well, so then it depends. If they don't know each other, then there's no problem. He did it for himself, the Jew can benefit from the leftovers, right? And that would apply to, let's say, if he schlepped water for himself, or he collected grass for himself, whatever's left over the Jew can use, no problem. However, when they do know each other, then it becomes a little bit more complicated. According to Abaye, you would only be able to use the leftovers, the Jew would only be able to use the leftovers if he wasn't there at the time that the non-Jew did the work. According to Rava, that's irrelevant. What's important is the kind of work that he did. If it's the kind of work that you don't have to do anything extra at all, if you're doing it for one person or if you're doing it for 1,000 people, so in that case, even though they recognize each other, the non-Jew really didn't do anything extra for the Jew, and therefore it would be permissible for the Jew to use. Okay. Fine. So now says the Gemara, Meisvei, we have a kasha. Amr learned Rabbi Gamliel, right? Rabbi Gamliel said to the other rabbis, Hol v'shalo b'faneinu aso ne'redbo. So we have a brayso in which Rabbi Gamliel says to the other rabbis, well, since this non-Jew didn't build this ramp in front of us, well, we can use it. So let's get off this boat. Well, that sounds exactly like Abaye's opinion, who says that what's important is whether or not the non-Jew built it in front of them. It sounds like Rabbi Gamliel is saying, well, since he didn't build it in front of us, we can use it. So Rava says, no problem. Ema hol v'aso ne'redbo. Just drop the words shelo b'fanenu. Just say, since he made it, i.e. he made it for himself, and it's no extra sweat off his back for us to use it, so then we will use it because his opinion is ner le'echad, ner le'mea. Which is funny that Rava is saying that because I feel like Rava is always the one who kind of responds to people who try to get away with things like this, of just like amending brises. And he says, wait a second, that's not what the brisa said. And here he is kind of benefiting from saying, yeah, just drop those two words. We're actually going to see this a little bit later on the page where he says something like that as well, where he kind of takes the brisa at face value. Yet over here, he doesn't seem to have a problem dropping a few words to show how it works with his opinion as well. Tashma, come in here. Ir she'Yisrael v'nachrim darin b'socha, v'yisa b'merchatz amchamemes b'Shabbos. So you have a city, and in the city there are both Jews and non-Jews in the same city, okay? And in the city there is a bathhouse. Now the bathhouse is open 24/7, and it's open on Shabbos for the non-Jewish people to use on Shabbos. And they're warming up the water on Shabbos. The question is, can a Jew go to the bathhouse immediately after Shabbos, right? Because after all, the water that was heated, the hot water he's going to be using immediately after Shabbos was heated up on Shabbos. So the question, of course, is, who were they heating up the water for? Were they heating up for the Jews? Were they heating up for themselves? So imrov nachrim mutter lerchotz ba miyad. Well, if the majority of the people in the city are non-Jews, right? So we consider it as if they're, basically, vis-a-vis this Yidala who gets to the bathhouse immediately after Shabbos, it's ki'ilu, the non-Jewish bathhouse attendant who is heating up the water doesn't know this Jew. It's a minority of Jews in the city. It's ki'ilu, they don't know each other, and therefore he was heating it up for himself, or he was heating up for the non-Jews, so the Jew can benefit from it immediately after Shabbos. In Rov Yisrael, however, if the majority of the people in the city are Jews, well then it's considered that this Jew who shows up to the bathhouse right after Shabbos, he and the bathhouse attendant know each other. The majority of the city is Jewish. It's considered like, the Jew and the non-Jew. The non-Jew who's doing the melacha of heating up the water, and the Jew who's showing up immediately after Shabbos, it's kilu, they know each other. And what do we say? Yamtim michdei sheyichamu chamen. Wait for enough time that the hot water should heat up. Because we're concerned that since the majority of the city is Jewish, it's ki'ilu, the non-Jewish bathhouse attendant, and the Jewish population, i.e. this Yid who's going to show up right after Shabbos to use the bathhouse, it's ki'ilu, they know each other. And because they know each other, we're concerned that the non-Jew is heating up the hot water for the Jew on Shabbos. Now, here's the thing. That's a kasha both on Abaye and Rava. It's a kasha on Abaye, because Abaye says that even when they know each other, as long as he's not, the Jew isn't there when the non-Jew is doing melacha, well then the Jew can benefit from it. Over here, the Yid was in the Beis HaMedrash on Shabbos, learning. The non-Jew was in the bathhouse heating up the water. They weren't in front of each other, and yet the Brisa is suggesting that he cannot use the water right away and benefit from the melacha that happened on Shabbos. But they weren't in front of each other. And according to Rava's opinion is that as long as it's ner le'echa, ner le'meya, as long as it's, makes no difference if the non-Jew has to do something for one person or do it for 1,000 people, well then, here also, you don't heat up the water any differently if it's for one person for 1,000 people, so therefore here as well. Why would the Yid who shows up after Shabbos, even though they recognize each other, why should he not be able to use the bathhouse? He didn't do any extra work for this Yid specifically. So the Gemara answers, Hasam ki mechamame adaita derubim mechamame. So the answer is that, here's the thing. In a city that is a majority of Yidden, when this non-Jewish bathhouse attendant heats up the water for the bathhouse on Shabbos, he's doing it with the intention of the majority of the users in mind. And since the majority of the people in the city are Jewish, he's not just heating it up for himself and then the Yid can chop around after the fact. He's mamish heating it up for the Jewish population that's going to come immediately after Shabbos. And therefore, it's basically a situation where the non-Jew is doing melacha on Shabbos for a Jew, and as we know, that would not be allowed. Tashma, come in here, a similar case. Ner adalat b'mesiba. What if there is a candle that's lit at some kind of a party, and I guess the party is happening on Shabbos? So imrov nachrim mutter l'shtamish lor, imrov Yisrael aser mechza aser. So we say that if the majority of the people at the party are non-Jewish, so then beseder, they were lighting up the candle for the non-Jewish people, and the kasha is, meaning it's the same kasha as before, right? The assumption is that when the majority of the people at the party are non-Jewish, so then it's ki'ilu, the non-Jewish person who lit the flame, and the Jewish people who are at the party, but they're not the majority, they don't know each other. But if the majority of the people are Jewish, then it's ki'ilu the person who lit the light, and these Jewish people who are there are right. They do know each other. And if it's half, so then basically because it's 50-50, it's hard to tell. Maybe the non-Jewish person lit it for the Jew. Maybe it's ki'ilu they know each other. Maybe they don't know each other. Therefore, it's not allowed. No, so it's the same kasha, right? That what? That still, right, the light was being lit, not in front of the Jews necessarily, and also it's a flame, so he's not doing anything extra for the Jewish people, and still we're saying that if the majority are Jews, so then it's not allowed. It's a kasha on Abaye and on Rava. It's the same answer. Hosam Nami, they're also kimadlike, adaita deruba madlike. They're lighting it based on the majority. They're lighting it for the majority, and therefore, if the majority of the people there at the party are Yidden, so basically the person lighting the flame is lighting it for the Yidden. And even though the Yidden might not have been there when he lit it, or even though he's not doing anything extra for the Yidden, still he's lighting it for them since they're the majority, and that would not be acceptable. Shmuel ikla levei Oven Toran. Shmuel visited the house of Oven Toran. Okay, fine. Also unachri adlik shraga. Now so I think what happened was, it's not super clear exactly all the details, but I think we could say it like this. Basically, Shmuel was in this room at this guy Oven Toran's house, and a non-Jew walked into the room and lit a candle. Ahajunu Shmuel la'ape. So Shmuel said, I can't use this. He just did melacha for me on Shabbos, so he turned away. Now, I assume that they don't know each other. I mean, he's a guest at somebody's house. A non-Jew walks in, lit a flame for him. Shmuel says, this non-Jew just did melacha for me, so he turned away. But then he saw that the non-Jew then brought a document and started reading the document. So Shmuel said, okay. So he lit it for himself. So he said, okay, well, I don't know who he is. He lit it for himself. I can benefit from it as well. And that's what he did. He turned back and continued learning, I guess. That is kol kisvei. Okay, yeah. I mean, it was a cool Mishnah, right? I mean, it was a little bit complicated. I guess, I don't know. Yeah, I had a funny relationship with this Mishnah. On the one hand, the Gemara itself is a little bit complicated, right? I feel like it's a little spaghetti, trying to figure out the different opinions and what they're applying to. Did you know the guy? Did he not know the guy? Was he doing it for himself? It's a little bit complicated, but I think that when we zoom out and we take a step back and we just remember these rules that emerged from it, I think that you can be organized about it, right? What's important is if the non-Jew is doing melacha for the Jew, definitely not allowed. If he's doing it from himself, and then the Jew wants to benefit from the surplus, well, if they don't know each other, no problem. It becomes a little bit more complicated when they know each other, but even so, it's still not so complicated. Abaye says, look, if he's in front of the guy, so then it's a problem. If he's not in front of the guy, it's okay. Rava says it depends what the activity is. If it's something that he doesn't have to do anything extra for the Jew, such as lighting a candle or building a ramp, so then that is going to be permitted. That's really it. These things at the end with the majority Jews, the majority non-Jews, that's just a way of establishing who the person doing the melacha is doing it for. So it just becomes, if the majority are Jews, so then they're doing it for the Jews, in which case it's just goes back to rule number 1, which is if they're doing it for a Jew, the Jew cannot use it. So I think when you zoom out, and just remember the rules, it becomes pretty much more straightforward. Okay, friends, moving on to the new parak, the 17th parak of Masechta Shabbos, parak Kol HaKelim. Kol HaKelim nitalan b'Shabbos v'dasosen imoen. Any vessel, any kli that has a door on it, such as some kind of a carriage, so you can move them on Shabbos. V'dasosen imoen, and you can move it together with their door. No problem. Move the kli, move the door, move the carriage, move the door. Avapishin is sparku, and even if the door got separated from the kli, so you have a carriage, the door got separated from the carriage, you can still move the kli and the carriage on Shabbos. The door and the carriage on Shabbos. She'ein domin l'dalsos habayis v'she'ein min hamuchan, because they're not similar to the door of a house. Right? The door of a house is not considered muchan. Muchan is the opposite of muktzah. Muktzah is, it's not prepared before Shabbos. The door of a house is not prepared before Shabbos. She'eino min hamuchan. It's not muchan. It's not prepared before Shabbos. It's considered connected to the ground, connected to your house. You wouldn't be able to, disconnect and move a door or move a disconnected door on Shabbos. But if it's part of a kli, and the kli is something that's movable on Shabbos, so then you would be able to move the kli, you'd be able to move the door, no problem. Notel adam kurnis lefatzea boes ha'agozen. A person could take a hammer and use that hammer to crack open nuts, no problem. Kardom lachtoch bo esadvela. You can take a hatchet and use that hatchet to cut a fig cake where the figs are very, very tightly pressed together and it's not easy to cut. You need to use a hatchet. Megera lagur ba'es agvina, you can use a saw to saw apart cheese. Magrefa ligrof ba'es agrogris, you can use a shovel to shovel out dried figs from a barrel. If you have a barrel and there are dried figs in there and you want some kind of a shovel to get everything out, so you can use a shovel. Es harachas, es hamalges, lasis olav, likaton. You can use a winnowing shovel and a pitchfork in order to put food on it. And I don't know if you're going to exactly feed a child with a pitchfork or present the food to the child with a pitchfork. Okay, but you can use it. Es hakush ves hakarkar. You can use a spindle and a weaver's reed, litrov bow, in order to use like a toothpick, to stick into some fruit and eat it. Machat shel yad lito bo es hakotes. You can use a needle, like a sewing needle, so that you can remove a splinter. Vishal sakoim liftoach bo es hadeles. You can use the needle of a from like sack makers, so they have bigger, less gentle, less delicate, more bigger and rougher needles that they use to create sacks. You can use that to, if you lost your key and you need to pick the lock, you can use that. It says the Gemara, kol akelim nitalin. Okay, so we're saying that you can move all of these vessels on Shabbos. V'afal pishin isparku b'Shabbos, and even though they became separated on Shabbos, v'lo mibaya b'chol, and certainly if they became separated during the week. Meaning, what the Gemara is saying is that the implication of the Mishnah is that you read it like this, that if you have a kli, right, you have, let's say, a carriage, and there's a door on this carriage, and the door falls off, and they want to say that what the Mishnah is saying is that even if, right, when the Mishnah says, afal pishin isparku, that even though the door fell off of the carriage, what it's saying is that even though the door fell off of the carriage on Shabbos, you would still be able to move both the door and the carriage, implying that certainly if the carriage became separated from the door, or the door became separated from the carriage during the week, you would be able to move that on Shabbos. But the Gemara says, Adrabah, the truth of the matter is that the opposite would really make sense, right? Right? Shabbos is less of the Chiddush. B'Shabbos muchanan al gabe avian, right? On Shabbos, the door is already considered mukhan. Remember, I'm using mukhan as the opposite of muktzah. So on Shabbos, the door is already mukhan because it's connected to the kli. When Shabbos started, the door was connected to the carriage, and therefore, it's less of a chiddush to say that if the door becomes separated from the carriage on Shabbos, that I would be able to move it, because after all, when Shabbos started, the door was still connected to the carriage. It's a bigger chiddush to say that bechol, because ein muchanan al gabe avian, because, it's a bigger chiddush to say that if the door became separated from the carriage during the week, that I would still be able to move the door on Shabbos, because when Shabbos started, it was not connected to the carriage, and it was not mukhan, it was muktzah. Or I would argue that it could be considered muktzah. So therefore, right, so again, so the Gemara is saying, if I look at the Mishnah, the implication seems to be that I can move this door of the carriage that's separated from the carriage, even if it became separated on Shabbos. That's a big chiddush, but certainly, if it was separated before Shabbos, I would be able to move it on Shabbos. To which the Gemara says, what do you mean? The bigger chiddush is that if it got separated during the week, that I would be able to move it on Shabbos. If it became separated on Shabbos, it's less of a chiddush. When Shabbos started, it was still connected, so it wasn't muktzah when Shabbos started, so therefore it's not going to be muktzah now. It would be a bigger chiddush to say that even if it got separated during the week, I could still move the door on Shabbos, and it's not muktzah. Amar Abaye Achi Kamer says, Abaye, okay, this is what the Mishnah is saying. Kol hakelim nitalim b'Shabbos v'dal sosei nimoyin, that all these kelim can be moved on Shabbos with their doors. Afal pishin isparku b'chol nitalim b'Shabbos, and even though they became dismantled and separated during the week, they can nonetheless be moved on Shabbos. Okay, fine. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Deles shel shida v'shel teva v'shel migdal nitalin aval lo machzirin. So the rabbis taught, if you have a shida, teva, umigdal, if you have a carriage, a trunk, or a closet, okay, these are metaltalin. These are movable wooden objects, and they have doors on them. Okay? So we're saying, Deles, Shel Shida, V'Shel Teva, V'Shel Migdal. So the door of these wooden movable objects, Notlin, you can remove them on Shabbos, no problem. Avalom Achzirin, but do not replace them, do not put them back. So you can remove the door from these objects, but don't, if they're, like the doors are on hinges, so you can remove the door from the hinges, but don't put back the door into the hinges, or onto the hinges. Vishalul shel tarnagolim, if we're talking about a chicken coop, lo nodlim v'lo machzirin, you can't remove the door from the hinge, you can't replace the door onto the hinge, no way, neither one. So the Gemara says, Bishlama shalul shel tarnagolim, I understand the chicken coop. I understand why you can't attach or detach the doors on a chicken coop. Because kasavar, kevin de mechaber ba'ara, yesh binyan bekarka, yesh stira bekarka. Because since the chicken coop is attached to the ground, it's like a little house kind of thing that the chickens hang out in. So since it's attached to the ground, well, it's part of the karka, and yesh binyan b'karka, yesh stira b'karka. There's building in the, when it comes to karka, when it comes to earth, ground, and there's also dismantling when it comes to the ground. And therefore, you cannot attach the door to the chicken coop because that would be binyan, and you can't detach the door from the chicken coop because that would be stira. Ela shel shida v'shel teva v'shel migdal, my kasavar. But when it comes to the carriage, to the trunk, and to the closet, what is the opinion in this brisa? I don't get it. If he holds that there is building when it comes to vessels and there is dismantling when it comes to vessels, I'm sorry. Well, then yesh stira b'kelim. If he holds that there is building when it comes to kelim, and for that reason you would be unable to attach the door to this, I'm just going to call it shida teva umigdal, instead of keep on translating them, because then I always have to remember what they are. So if we're saying that you can attach, or let's just choose one of them. Let's just choose a closet. And then it applies to also the carriage and the trunk. Okay? Okay. So we're going to use the closet. So if we say that there is binyan b'kelim, and for that reason I'm not allowed to attach the door to the closet, well then yesh stira b'kelim. Well then there should also be dismantling when it comes to vessels, in which case I should not be allowed to remove the door from the closet, and yet we're saying that should be acceptable. V'yein stira b'kelim and binyan b'kelim. And if we're saying that you're allowed to detach the door from the closet because there's no concept of dismantling when it comes to kelim, well then there shouldn't be any concept of building when it comes to kelim, and I should be allowed to attach it. So what's pshat? Amar Abaye, L'olam K'savar yesh binyan v'kelim v'yesh stira b'kelim. So Abaye says, look, the Tana of this brisa holds that there is building when it comes to vessels, and there is dismantling when it comes to vessels. And that's why you're not allowed to attach the door to the closet, because yesh binyan b'kelim. The question is, how come you're allowed to detach, to remove the door from the closet? What about yesh stira b'kelim? So he says, v'shenit lo ka'amar. So Abaye says, no, it doesn't say that you're allowed to detach the door from the closet. That would not be allowed, because yesh stira b'kelim. What it's saying is that if the door was already detached from the closet, you would not be allowed to attach the door to the closet, because yesh binyan b'kelim. But you would not be allowed to remove the door from the closet because yesh stira b'kelim. Amalei Rava shtei tshuvas b'davar. Rava says, I have two questions on you, Abaye. Chada denotlin katani. Question number one, it says, it doesn't, and this is what I was saying before, that I feel like Rava is always like the stickler to not change things in brises. And I'm not just saying from this example. In my mind, he says it on lots of examples, but I could be wrong. Anyways, he says to Abaye, look, the fact of the matter is, the brisa says that notlin, that you would be allowed to remove the door from the closet. It doesn't say if it was already removed. It says your mama is allowed to remove it. Ve'od, in question number 2, my aval lo machzir. What does it mean? But you cannot return it. But you cannot attach the door to the closet. That but you cannot attach only makes sense if it's saying that you may detach, but you may not attach. According to you, Abai, that it was already detached, what's the but? What's the thing that you are allowed to do that but you're not allowed to do something else? So Ella Amar Rava, rather Rava says the opposite. Kosaver ein binyan b'kelim ve'ein stir b'kelim. There's no concept of building by kelim. There's no concept of dismantling by kelim. That's why you're allowed to attach. That's why you're allowed to detach the door from the closet, because there's no concept of dismantling. Well, if there's no concept of dismantling, then there shouldn't be any concept of building. So why can't I attach it? We're concerned that if you attach the door to the closet, you might attach it really, really well and make it like, permanent. In which case, that would be makeh b'patish, doing the final blow in making this kli, and that would not be acceptable. So, because we're concerned that you might, kind of attach it really, really well, we say not to attach it at all. But in theory, in terms of binyan, there wouldn't be binyan b'kelim or stir b'kelim. We just have a gezerah about makeh b'patish. Okay. Okay, notel adam kurnas chulenu. So the Mishnah said that a person is allowed to take a hammer and use that hammer to open a nut. So what kind of hammer are we talking about? Amar of Yehuda, says of Yehuda, kurnas shel egozin lefatzea bo esa egozin aval shel napachin lo. Rav Yehuda says, look, when we say that you're allowed to use a hammer to open up a nut, that does not mean that you can go to your shop, take your blacksmith's hammer, and take your nut and use your blacksmith hammer to open a nut. No way. What the Mishnah is saying is that if you have a hammer that's specifically for opening nuts, for cracking nuts, you can use that hammer. Right? Amar Rav Yehuda says, Rav Yehuda, kurnas shel egozin. You can use a hammer that's specifically for nuts. You can use that hammer to open up nuts. Aval shel napachin lo. You cannot use the hammer of a blacksmith to open a nut on Shabbos. Because Rav Yehuda holds that if you have a davar shemelachto le'isur, something that you use for something forbidden, such as a blacksmith's hammer, it's used for blacksmithing. That's not allowed to be done on Shabbos. So you can't use it on Shabbos, even the tzorech gufo, even for a purpose that is 100% usable for its body. Meaning, what's its body? Its body is the hammer. A hammer can 100% be used to open a nut. Meaning, it's not normally used for this purpose. It's normally used for as a, in the work of a blacksmith. However, there is no reason why you cannot, technically speaking, use this hammer to open a nut. However, Rav Yehuda says that doesn't matter. Fact of the matter is, this is a hammer that's generally used for something that's forbidden on Shabbos. Therefore, we don't use it on Shabbos, even ligufo, even for something that its body, that its form could totally be used for. Doesn't matter, you may not use it. Amalei Rabba says to Rav Yehuda, Elamiata, but let me ask you a kasha. Seif v'dikatone ves arachas ves amalges lasis olav likaton. When the Seif of the Mishnah says that you're allowed to use a winnowing shovel or a pitchfork in order to give food to a child, are we talking about a winnowing shovel and a pitchfork that are specifically for giving food to children? Is there such a thing as a winnowing shovel and a pitchfork that was specified for use for children? Ella Amar Rabba Kurnas shall napachin lefatzea bo or egozin kasav davar shemelachto l'tzorech gufo muter. Rather, Rabba says no. We're not talking about this hammer. Is not a hammer that is specifically for opening nuts, and this pitchfork and winnowing shovel is not a pitchfork and winnowing shovel that's specifically for children, for feeding them. Rather, we're talking about a blacksmith's hammer. Even a blacksmith's hammer can be used for cracking a nut on Shabbos, because he says davar shemelachto le'isur, something that is normally used for something asur, such as this blacksmith's hammer, which is generally used for blacksmithing, and nonetheless it's tzorech gufo muter. You can use it on Shabbos if it's for a purpose that is 100% technically usable for, that this kli is technically usable for this purpose. So this blacksmith hammer, there's no reason why, it shouldn't be completely functional as a nutcracker. And therefore, just be careful, but therefore, you can use it on Shabbos to crack open nuts. That is machlokes between Rabbah and Rabbi Yehuda. Friends, that was Daf Kuf Chav Beis. I guess it was like, I don't know, it feels kind of a little complicated, but also geschmack at the same time, right? I hope. Friends, let's go over it. Maybe it'll be geschmack when we go over it. So, okay, at the beginning we started off with just kind of a few random halachas from Rabbi Abba Bar Kana, Amar Rabbi Chanina. But then we got into the real meat of the page, which was that first Mishnah, which talked about a non-Jewish person doing melacha for a Jew on Shabbos. So here's what you got to know. So if he's doing it for the Jew, well then it's usur. Forget it. If he's not doing it for himself at all, he's doing it only for the Jew, it's not allowed. However, if the non-Jew is doing it for himself, and now the Jew benefit from whatever, meta benefits there might be, well then, so if they don't know each other, it's easier. Well then the Jew can benefit from, if it's a light, he can benefit from the light that the non-Jew is doing for himself. If there's like some extra water that he schlepped for his animal, the Jew can use that water. No, it's no problem, as long as they don't know each other. When they do know each other, it becomes a little bit more complicated because we're concerned that maybe the non-Jew is doing the melacha with the Jew in mind. Meaning he's doing it for himself, but he also maybe takes a little bit more water, a little bit more grass in order to help out the Jew. So, in that case, Abai says, well, if the non-Jew is doing the melacha in front of the Jew, okay, so then it's not allowed, because we assume that maybe he's doing it for the Jew. But as long as the Jew is not there, so then, then after the fact, it would be okay. And Rava says, no, it doesn't matter whether the Jew is there or not. Rava says, it matters what the kind of activity is. If it's an activity such as schlepping water, and they know, the Jew and the non-Jew know each other, and the non-Jew is schlepping some water for his animal, and then can the Jew use the leftover water? The answer is no. Because the non-Jew, we have to be concerned that the non-Jew took some extra water for the Jew. However, if it's something like lighting a candle or building a ramp for a boat, ner le'echad ner le'meya, right? He's not doing any additional work for the Jew, and therefore that would be acceptable. Okay. Then we moved on to a new parak called Akelim, and we talked about chicken coops and like closets and stuff. So let's talk about that for a second. So you're not allowed to attach or detach a door to a chicken coop, to or from a chicken coop on Shabbos, because a chicken coop is connected to the ground, right? And yesh binyan bikarka and yesh stira bikarka. There's building when it comes to ground, and there's dismantling when it comes to ground, and therefore you would not be allowed to attach or detach a door when it comes to a chicken coop. When it comes to shida teva umigdal, when it comes to a what are those things again? A carriage, a trunk, and a closet. Well, says machlokas Abaye and Rava. According to Abaye, he says yesh binyan b'kelim and yesh stira b'kelim. For that reason, you cannot add the door or remove the door from the shida teva umigdal, from these things. And the brisa that says that you are allowed to, it's saying that that when the thing is already detached, you're also not allowed to attach it. But you would not be allowed to detach it because yesh stira b'kelim. Rava says ein binyan b'kelim and ein stira b'kelim, and for that reason you would be allowed to remove the door from the shida teva umigdal, but you would not be allowed to add it because it's a gezerah that we're concerned about makah b'patish. At the very end, we then got into this interesting machlokes between Rav Yehuda and Rabbah regarding, can you use a hammer to open a nut? The question is, can you use a hammer from a blacksmith to open a nut? Because technically there's no reason why you can't, technically speaking, use a blacksmith's hammer for a nut. Rav Yehuda says you cannot use a blacksmith's hammer for a nut because kli shemlachto le'isur, the tzorach gufo is usur. Whereas Rabbah says that you would be allowed to use it because even though it's melacha le'isur, tzorach gufo is permitted. Friends, I hope you enjoyed Daf Kuf Chav Beis of Masechta Shabbos. Have a great day.